You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and this program is coming to you from my home in New York City. My beloved city has become the global epicenter of the 21st century's first plague, the pandemic coronavirus evincing itself as COVID-19. A quick aside, we'll be off next week and back on April 19th. Don't go all anxious on me. I'm very healthy, I'm well stocked for groceries, and I'm snug at home. On today's program, though, we're going to speak with Helen Zia about the escalating attacks against Asian Americans and Asians, blaming innocent people for what Donald Trump persists in calling the Chinese virus. We'll also look at the specific, disproportionate pressure put on half the world's population, women, by this worldwide plague. And then there's the Surrealism Corner and the Comfort Zone and Fighting Words. So let's hold hands and go inside the headlines. Traumatic as this pandemic is for everybody, it does exert even greater pressure on female human beings cross-culturally. Suffering is not a competition, but we do live in a worldwide patriarchy, and such systems, particularly in crisis situations, become all the more so of whatever they were, the status quo, not less. So, for example, we can look at categories like work. The United States is a service economy now, no longer a manufacturing one. But look closely at all the workers being referred to as being genderless. Housekeeping cooks, servers, telephone operators, desk clerks, etc. in hotels, they're actually female. So are the attendants on cruise ships, and the wait staffs in most restaurants and resorts and spas and clubs, the sales clerks in retail, the textile workers, and the great mass of office workers and teachers at every level, including childcare workers, the hardest-hit industries. COVID-19 economic fallout has put women at disproportionate risk, exacerbating sex and gender fault lines, as well as ethnic, racial, social, and economic ones. But in planning for social crisis or natural disasters, gender issues generally are still ignored. Globally, women make up 70% of healthcare workers. In China's Hubei province, where the virus originated, 90% of healthcare workers are women. In the United States, it's around 78%. And nurses' levels of exposure are higher than doctors because they're doing intimate care, collecting specimens, drawing blood, cleaning patients. That intimate care also explains why contagious diseases are most easily spread between family members, as was the case during the Ebola outbreak in Africa from 1976 to 2014. Because women are the primary caregivers and also traditionally prepare bodies for burial, their vulnerability increased, with the transmission rate higher in households than in hospitals. Economically, viral outbreaks are crushing for women who comprise most of the part-time and the informal labor force workers all around the world. These are the jobs that are usually the first to be wiped out. Furthermore, in West Africa, a man's income returned to what he had made before the outbreak faster than a woman's did. Policies like paid sick leave and accessible, affordable health care address this, but are notably beyond reach for most women in the United States. Then there's the work at home. A Gallup poll from January reported that women were more than 7 times as likely to care for their children on a daily basis as men in heterosexual married or cohabiting couples. Also, 80% of single-parent families are headed by single mothers. The sheer physical workload of having children and partners at home 24/7, not even mentioning mental stress and emotional stress, is simply staggering. Then there are the women who have to go to jobs as essential workers but need daycare centers, which are closing and soon may shut down entirely. Women with kids already do 2.6 times as much unpaid caregiving and domestic work as their heterosexual partners. That's according to the United Nations, which is characteristically, diplomatically underestimating the number. The pandemic will only exacerbate all this. Oh, and add in the elderly, whose care is also primarily borne by women. Women are on the front lines in every way. The social safety net simply does not really exist for women in this country, the richest and supposedly most developed in the world. You only need look at the issue of domestic violence, which notoriously spikes in situations of great stress, natural disasters, economic crashes, personal threat, forced crowding, and even major football tournaments. All these elements, except for the live sports, are present in the locked-down homes around the world. In China, the number of divorce applications increased drastically in the last month in at least 2 provinces, Sichuan and Shanxi. But different places deal differently with such situations. From Brazil to Germany, from China to Italy, we see an alarming rise in domestic abuse. In Hubei province, domestic violence reports to police more than tripled in one county alone during the February lockdown, from 47 last year to 162 this year. We see the same pattern around the world. A rise of 40 or 50% in Brazil. In Cyprus, hotline calls rose 30% in the week after the first case was confirmed. The Catalan regional government in Spain saw its helpline jump by 20% in the first few days of confinement. In Italy, when calls to helplines dropped, they were actually being replaced by desperate text messages and emails for fear of being overheard. In Spain, where lockdown rules are extremely strict with heavy fines, the country has seen its first domestic violence fatality in the coastal province of Valencia, where a woman was killed by her husband in front of their children. In the United Kingdom, women have called for special police powers to evict perpetrators for the duration of the lockdown. The reports come from everywhere. A women's shelter in Rome, a campaign to help wives and girlfriends deal with batterers in Greece, Uttar Pradesh, a state that normally has one of the worst track records in violence against women in India, needs a new domestic violence helpline and just got it. In France, there are code words for women to say when they walk into pharmacies. If they ask for mask 19, the pharmacist knows it's a help call. France has seen a 36% rise in reported incidents, and it's generally assumed that for every one that's reported, 3 or 4 more go unreported. France is also paying for 20,000 nights in hotel rooms and planning to create pop-up counseling centers in supermarkets. In Australia, the Silent Solution emergency call allows a woman to reach police by just using her touch-dial phone without needing to speak and risking being overheard. Appallingly, in the United States, many such creative ways of addressing these tragedies don't exist. So the emotional toll and physical threat have not only increased, but are expected to continue. In such times, when even the number of cases doesn't increase, the intensity and frequency of abuse do. That's a pattern witnessed during the 2008 economic crisis and also after 9/11, after Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina. In recent years, the number of domestic violence cases has surged, making up more than half of all violent crimes in the United States in 2018. Before the COVID-19 lockdown, these victims might have felt safe once their partner left for work and felt their kids were safe at school, but now everyone's home all the time, and there is no escape. In New York, shelters are considered essential services and are functioning as normally as they can, although many are at or approaching full capacity, and several organizations have had to cut back on services due to overcrowding at shelters. Domestic violence activists urge safety planning, running through painful scenarios. Where is the safest place in your house? Don't have arguments in the kitchen or bathroom. Do you have a car, and can you sleep in it if you need to? Some activists suggest setting up a daily phone call with a relative or friend who will call you at a specific time to check that you're there and okay, and they suggest you set up a code word with this person so as to communicate if you're not okay. Courts are working remotely, but still obtaining a legal protection order is considered an essential service in most jurisdictions, not that protection orders have proven to protect much in the past. If you have a friend or know someone you suspect is being abused, try to help in these ways, and let her know that she can find help online. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available around the clock and in more than 200 languages at 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-SAFE, or text LOVE IS, LOVEIS, LOVE IS to 22522, 22522. In New York State, there is the Domestic and Sexual Violence Hotline in multiple languages and a special 711 line for deaf or hard of hearing callers. Most states have similar hotlines, easy to find. Nevertheless, the shelter system is crashing under the weight of so many women in need, some fleeing with children in tow. None of this is helped by there being a gender gap in risk perception. A 2006 research project by the Sociology Department at Sweden's Göteborg University found that men consistently expressed less concern for a range of threats, but did relate to risks about their working life, that is, risks of unemployment and economic problems. Women perceived threats more keenly as relating to their family and home, to life and death. So a simple argument about hand-washing, men do it far less than women, as we've reported in the past, can easily escalate into a major conflagration, especially in tight spaces. As one public health official noted, we need to make sure men don't feel too macho about germs. And this just in. Alicia Haridasani Gupta, gender reporter at the New York Times, has reported that although we're learning still about the virus, and we know that men seem to have higher fatality rates, and although we're learning about age being an affecting factor, in the United States, where ramped-up testing is churning out reams of data, the one thing we're not monitoring is the sex breakdown. How many women are infected versus men? Are men and women equally likely to get infected? What's the fatality rate for each sex? Are symptoms exactly alike for men and women? The CDC contained, in its latest update on cases and death, no mention of male and female patients. We can confidently say that being male is a risk factor, say scientists at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. But this kind of information, or lack thereof, matters because men and women are likely to have fundamentally different reactions to the virus and even to the vaccines and treatment. Research has shown that SARS, influenza, Ebola, and HIV viruses all affect women and men differently. There are sex differences in every tissue and organ system in the human body. And a recent research paper from Huazhong University of Science and Technology in Wuhan, China, backs that up. Scientists studied the plasma of 331 confirmed coronavirus patients and found that in the most severe cases, women had a higher level of antibodies than men. the approach of ignoring women and developing a vaccine for large-scale clinical trials can be dangerous. Between 1998 and 2000, women represented only 22% of initial small-scale safety trials for new drug applications submitted to the FDA. The same agency found that 8 of the 10 FDA-approved drugs, 8 of the 10 that were withdrawn from the market, posed greater health risks for women than men, including causing valvular heart disease and liver failure. On the other hand, Johnson & Johnson, which is pushing to get clinical trials of a vaccine started by September, says it will analyze data by sex and age from phase 1 onward. It was back in 1990 that the National Institutes for Health established the Office of Research on Women's Health, and in 1993, U.S. lawmakers required the NIH to include more women and minorities in clinical research and trials. Yet in 2016, preclinical trials on animals still rely heavily on male animals or omit reporting of the sex. It is astonishing. How can we be so omnipresent and so disproportionately affected by this plague, and yet be so invisible? Time for our first break, but stick with us because coming up, there's a conversation with Helen Zia about the rising tide of anti-Asian American and Asian sentiment, bigotry. There's comfort zone and fighting words, and before any of those, we need to, unless we're already there, go into the surrealism corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Since the entire world is in the surrealism corner, does that mean we should now call this next segment the Real Corner? Here's how Panama has decided to deal with the global pandemic. They're separating men and women in terms of who gets to go outside when. Women can go outside on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, men on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. It's not at all clear why. They haven't given a reason that they're turning into, Saudi Arabia, but that's Panama's mandate. When in doubt, use sexism to settle a problem. Back here at home, Harvey Weinstein tested positive for the coronavirus at a state prison in New York while serving a 23-year sentence for rape and sexual assault. He, along with Bill Cosby and R. Kelly, all behind bars for sexual assault, are pressing to be released from lockup because they fear the treatment inside that they would get isn't as good as they would get outside. Yaha! But what about the other prisoners? Now, these next items have to do with the dialogue I've been having with my lower self. You will remember that in a previous broadcast and podcast, I raised the issue of the Arizona couple. They were fans of Donald Trump, saw him on television touting chloroquine as a possible treatment for COVID-19, decided they had a version of chloroquine, a different one, not pharmaceutical, one they'd use to clean their fish tank. They had that on a back shelf, took it, the man died, the woman is in critical condition. And I implied, rather, my lower self did, that the world was better off without them. Well, I've come up with a different solution, and I'm convincing my lower self of it in light of the following evidence. Jerry Falwell at Liberty University, the right-wing fundamentalist university in Lynchburg, Virginia, refused to close the campus despite medical advice to do so, and welcomed students back after spring break. And now some students are in the hospital, some are sequestered for testing, and he's been forced to back down from that position. Meanwhile, a Louisiana Pentecostal pastor, Reverend Tony Spell, has defied a stay-at-home order this week from the governor and welcomed 1,800 people to his Pentecostal services, despite a petition online that more than 5,000 people have signed, demanding that Louisiana officials charge him with reckless endangerment. Meanwhile, a Florida pastor has been arrested after defying virus orders. This is the Reverend Rodney Howard Brown, pastor of a Pentecostal megachurch, who held 2 church services last Sunday, each filled with hundreds of parishioners, and has now been arrested for defying emergency orders and displaying reckless disregard for human life. And then, of course, there is, at last but not least, Hobby Lobby. You remember Hobby Lobby? Hobby Lobby took all the way to the Supreme Court and unfortunately, tragically, won a case that they did not have to pay for the Affordable Care Act provision requiring family-owned corporations to pay for insurance coverage of contraception. We're not talking abortion here, we're talking contraception. Well, Hobby Lobby, which is a family-owned and religious family to boot, has kept open its stores, thinking, I don't know what they're thinking, Trump said, and God will protect them. Colorado officials have sent cease and desist letters informing them that Hobby Lobby, which sells party goods, favors, balloons, is not a critical business, and so far Hobby Lobby has not responded. And all these examples are the tip of the iceberg. So here's what I told my lower self. I said, first, these people have a right to their faith system, and I respect and defend that right, even though I have the right to criticize the hell out of the content of that faith system, or to criticize having one at all, but that's beside the issue. I said, let's be creative about this. We certainly can point out that now believing Trump will get you dead. Never mind God, Trump. There's hard evidence mounting in the community called his base that equates believing Trump's statement with suicide, and by extension homicide. If you don't believe evidence in your own flesh and evidence in the flesh of those you love, you are willing then to risk your life in the service of Donald Trump. You willing to do that? Really? See, this is a win-win approach, because if the harsh lesson these facts teach is heeded, it opens up a world of dialogue and possibilities. But if such evidence is further ignored, then Trump's base will follow their Pied Piper through hell into death. Neither I nor my lower self truly wish them that. I convinced my lower self that what our slogan should be is, believing Trump equals death now. The choice is theirs. It's real. We have to take another brief pause here, but while we do, think about this. Imagine going through everything all of us are going through, and then on top of that being blamed for it, as Asian Americans and Asians are, as if a virus shared an ethnicity. It's crazy. We'll be right back. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
For the conversation today, I'm so glad to welcome back to the program dear friend and colleague Helen Zia. She's the author of Asian American Dreams, The Emergence of an American People, and she is the co-author with Wenho Lee of My Country versus Me, the first-hand account by the Los Alamos scientist who was falsely accused of being a spy. Her work on the 1980s Asian American landmark civil rights case of anti-Asian violence is documented in the Academy Award-nominated film Who Killed Vincent Chin? And her most recent book that she was on the program discussing is a fascinating book that just came out a few months ago, Last Boat Out of Shanghai, the epic story of the Chinese who fled Mao's revolution. It's my great comfort and joy to welcome back to the program Helen Zia. Helen, my dear, welcome back to the program. It's comforting to have you here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here with you, Robin, and to hear your voice always on your podcast, but to be here with you is amazing.
How's the Bay Area doing?
Well, it's under lockdown, and our governor and officials out here were early on this, and I think that's because we also on the West Coast had the first cases.
Yep.
So there's maybe a little bit more awareness out here, but we had to go through the same things where, you know, the young people were misinformed and erroneously told that they would be relatively fine, and so then we've gone through a period of people being banned from parks and you know, a lot of public places. So I think it's, you know, like, well, New York for sure is way beyond where we are in the Bay Area. But everybody is, it's pretty quiet, let's just say that.
Yeah, except for a siren now and then, an ambulance, you know.
Same here.
Yeah, amazing. Well, the quite serious and terrifying bump in chauvinism, national chauvinism, and in particular focused against Asian Americans, since Trump keeps calling it the Chinese virus. And I was getting apoplectic over this and then remembered that one of my dearest friends is a leading member of the Chinese American community and, in fact, the Asian American community. So, Helen, take it away because the statistics are alarming.
Well, Robin, even before the lockdowns and now, you know, knowing that the U.S. is the epicenter, when China was the center of the story, the name-calling, the bullying, the beatings, the attacks, and physical harassment had already begun. And there were stories of kids being beaten up so severely in schoolyards that they were sent to the hospital. But as soon as it started hitting home here, and of course, as you pointed out, with the lunatics at the white supremacy house and this administration insisting on racializing it, and you know, all of this has just been a clear signal that those of us who look East Asian, and that comprises the vast majority of Asians in the world, have become walking targets. And it's frightening for people. A few organizations, nonprofit advocacy groups have set up, you know, website reporting areas where they're starting to document this, and people can report in cases, and they are exploding. I think many people who are paying attention have already seen anecdotal reports that have appeared on social media and so on, but the actual numbers are astounding. There's a group in the Bay Area that did some research covering from January to through February, and found that in that period there were more than 1,000 cases reported. And then they started doing week by week once they set up their reporting system. And just last week they had more than 650 cases. And this is just one reporting site. So
and it's, I might add, and it's the Bay Area, which is, San Francisco is famous in no small part, in I would say most of its parts, because it is an Asian American center with great food and great Asian culture and a mix of diverse Asian cultures. I mean, that's why the tourist trade goes there. So there's a double irony going down that must taste awfully bitter.
Yes, for sure. I mean, there's an assumption that we like to think that the more people are familiar with other cultures or people unlike themselves, whether through food, through getting to know them as friends, that will break down the barriers of otherness. But it takes more than that, and as you pointed out, I've been involved in these anti-hate campaigns for a while, and this is awfully reminiscent of when I was in Detroit, and it was a time of anti-Japanese hatred, and that was at another time of economic crisis. It wasn't a time when people were actually dying and losing family members, but it was when people were losing their jobs for the foreseeable future, and a Chinese American man was killed because he looked Japanese. Yeah. And at that time, I mean, it was a clear expression of people's misery and frustration, and they were looking for somebody to blame. And it didn't help that the national leaders, whether it was from the corporate C-suites to the halls of Congress, were all saying, it's Japan. They're the enemy, and we should send atomic bombs back there. We're at war. And it's the same rhetoric we're hearing now, the same thing of looking for blame. God forbid that anybody would point the finger at, our so-called leaders in Washington to say, hey, why did you fritter away 2 months when you could have been gathering up protective gear and ventilators?
Well, that's exactly why it happens. I mean, in other words, it's a diversion tactic so that people won't notice, or if they notice, they'll be diverted by the shiny keys that are being dangled over here. And when there's fear, and you can find a boogie woman, a boogie man, a boogie, which always historically, classically happens. It's the Japanese, it's the Chinese, it's the Jews, it's the Mexicans, it's the other. And standardly it's woman.
Right.
If you can point it there, then they won't point it up at you. And notice that you disbanded the very office in the White House that was set up to pre-plan for in case of pandemics, or the other 7,000 mistakes that you've made in getting us into this situation.
Another one of the ironies is that about approximately 25% of healthcare workers are immigrants, and a very high proportion of those are Asian American. And so here these are the first line responders, people who are risking their lives to take care of us. And I've actually seen stories of people saying that they are health workers, they are East Asian, on their way on the subway, on their way to work, to go to a hospital to treat people, and they've been attacked and spit on. And this blaming thing, it knows no logic, but unfortunately, we've been in a period of, make America white again. And so, the pump has been primed.
It is so horrific that the people who are mostly women and mostly Asian, who are mostly on the front lines. I've never been in an ICU visiting a friend, but what the ICU wasn't completely peopled by Filipinas.
That's right.
That they are the ones being spat at, being shoved, being physically assaulted, being barred from transportation or from entering grocery stores. My God, not to speak of the verbal harassment.
Right. And so not only is there a COVID-19 pandemic, but there is also a pandemic of anti-Asian racism that's happening. That's a virus. And it is global. People are being attacked. Stories of people in the UK, in France, in different places. So it really will take leadership and the voices, the sane voices of women, of people of conscience, to stand up and say, hey, this is not the world that we want to come out of from this.
In the reports that you shared with me, one from Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, and I think it was a study done together with Chinese for Affirmative Action, which pointed out that women are 3 times more likely to report the harassment and attacks than men. Talk about that.
Well, we were trying to figure out why it is that 3 times, the reporting so far of these anti-Asian attacks, why that is. Because in historical looks at reporting on hate crime violence, almost across the board, the people attacked have been reported to be men. And so for a long time, women, feminists have been looking at these figures and saying, where are the women? Because we know that women are not free from this kind of abuse either. And in those days, these reports tended to be of extremely violent crimes, including killings. Mm-hmm. And what would happen, I surmised, is that when the attacks are on women, they tend to be shuffled off as sex crimes. Oh, just a gender crime. Let's not even, mix it with the hate crimes.
Right.
And so that's a whole nother dialogue about attacks on women and femicide being hate crimes as well. But in terms of the way the criminal justice system does its reports, and the Me Too movement has been so clear and outspoken about crimes against women must be taken seriously. But so with hate crimes and that kind of reporting in the past, it's mostly been men for all these different reasons, men who have been listed as victims. These reports today are self-reported at non-criminal justice websites. So these are community websites where people don't get discouraged, minimized or marginalized, turned away. And so they can report, and these groups have gone through and verified and looked at the reports as well. So I think if we had that kind of system in the past, we'd probably find that too, that there would be a greater number of women reporting than men. But there are a few reasons here that I speculate on. One is that, bullies and harm doers, often they are, looking to exert their power and domination. And a woman is an easy target in their minds. And Asian women, having this stereotype of being not only exotic but also passive and docile, which is not true, but that is the stereotype. And so, sure, let's just pick on this person. And the other thing is that, the gender difference between men and women, that men might be less willing to say that something, humiliating happened to them.
Right.
So those might account for the difference. I think, we're just starting. What the report I sent you was only 1 week, this past week's worth of data. And, 673 people reporting in 1 week. And at one of the reporting sites. So this isn't, this doesn't encompass what's going on nationally. But I think it'll be interesting to really look at the data and just see what kind of attacks these were, what circumstances, and all of that.
Right. Well, on this sheet that you sent me from this 1 week, there was 4.6 workplace discrimination, 67.3% verbal harassment, 23% shunning, 10% physical assault, and then online coughed and spat on. In other words, people coming up and literally coughing on somebody. Oh, my God.
Right.
And barred from transportation and barred from establishments and so forth. That's pretty terrifying in itself.
Right, and that 61% of those individuals who had these things happen to them were not of Chinese ancestry.
Yeah.
So this whole thing about lumping everybody who might look Chinese, which is a lot of people, and so there's no question that there's a racial profiling and racist element to it. Everybody is suffering, and I would just say, we need our sisters more than ever, and nobody should allow incidents to happen around them, and we all have a role to play on this, to stand up for what's right. And if people want to know more or to file a report if they need to, not just for themselves, but if you see something on social media, and I think it's their website too, there's Stop AAPI Hate, Stop AAPI Hate, and another one of the reporting sites is Stand Against Hatred, and that's a website, standagainsthatred.org. And so, this is a time, if you have it in your energy and whatever's going on in everybody's lives to also reach out and stay connected and support other communities, this is the time to do that.
Well, there's a time because you're at home. There's no commute. There's no travel time. You just one room to the next. So those seem to be two very good ways to get involved and be supportive to sisters who, on top of everything else that everybody is going through, now have this as well. Oh, Helen, I'm so always glad to speak with you. I'm so sorry that the occasion is this, but I'm so grateful that you came forth immediately and said yes, you would do it. I send you much, much love, and love to Leah, and stay safe.
Thank you. Love to you, and you stay safe.
Well, we certainly can't proceed on to fighting words without a quick stop in the comfort zone. So, a couple of wonderful things to watch on the telly. If you haven't already seen the Marsh family in the United Kingdom's version of Les Mis Lockdown, as they call it, you should. It's the best version of Les Mis that I've ever seen. In fact, I loathed Les Mis itself, but this is the first time I've liked it. It's quite hilarious. Bless them. It's the Marsh family, Lockdown, Les Mis, YouTube. Also, Rachmaninoff, him very self, playing his own elegy opus number 3, number 1, on YouTube. It's an old film, and it's quite beautiful, and to watch the composer himself play his own piece is very moving, and it's a beautiful piece. And then there's Alvin Ailey and Revelations, one of his greatest ballets. The Ailey Company has just launched Ailey All Access, which is a streaming service that you can get to on their website, alvinailey.org. And you can see a number of the ballets for free for a limited time. It's quite moving, beautiful, spirit-elevating, and other good stuff. 2 more things. One, stress reliever. I've rediscovered bubble baths. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good, and very good while eating a cookie. You know my thing with cookies. And the other day I discovered I was out of milk, but I did have half and half. So I had a small cup, but a cup of half and half with a cookie in this bubble bath. It was wicked. It was absolutely divine. I forgot everything for 10 seconds. And last, think of this. People who are very satisfied with the mask wearing, observant Muslim women who have been wearing the hijab, and in fact the niqab, which is the face covering of everything but the eyes, and may have felt rather lonely doing that, particularly since men got very nasty to them if they didn't. But this time around, men have to wear the niqab too, so that makes it different. And they must be thinking, men are wearing it, haha. That's a comfort. One more quick break, and I'll return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
These days, it seems that all words are fighting words. After 9/11, I wrote 3 descriptive email dispatches to friends. They shared them, and the dispatches wound up going around the world, garnering the name Letters from Ground Zero. Then, in 2012, when Hurricane Sandy devastated the New York area, I devoted fighting words on this program to Letter from Ground Zero 4. This is Letter from Ground Zero 5. It's a clear, damp, exuberant spring. Plague stalks the city, swinging his scythe against all he breathes on. But the little calorie pear trees on my street are in blossom, swaying to a different rhythm, lazily dropping creamy petals in drifts of a carefree snowstorm. At this time of year I go into my small city garden to attend the dawn chorus of birds singing against the background roar of the metropolis. Today there is no roar, no city thrum, no muffled pounding urban mighty heart, no truck gear clash, horn blare, exhaust pipe sigh, no wheel squeak or brake squeal, no storefront grate clanking open, no doors banging, no car radio blaring from drive-by late-night, last-night partygoers. Today there's silence, palpable silence, sliced through every minute or so by an ambulance siren. The birds have no competition. They're as indifferent to its absence as they were to its presence. They are descended from dinosaurs. Today, New York City is the global epicenter of coronavirus cases. But everyone else will get their chance. More have already died from the virus in New York than perished on 9/11. Crematoria, operating at triple speed to cope with triple than usual quantity, soon may be unable to deal with the number of bodies. Reporters, themselves braving the streets, stammer on the television to find synonyms for words like brave, synonyms for valiant, for dedicated, synonyms to describe the medical workers, EMS personnel, and myriad other aides, cleaners, staff, delivery people, and other essential personnel who still have to, or choose to, go to their jobs, who even volunteer to do so, who even come from faraway places to volunteer. People have taken to wearing white ribbons to honor them. It's an understandable gesture of reverence, combined with a famishment to do something. But the television tributes soon become ritualized, sentimentalized, as facile as curbside balloon tributes to victims of accidents or homicides, momentarily satisfying anxiety, but ultimately useless when it's the system itself that needs to change. Locked down in front of computers, we are depersonalized, disembodied. It's a bizarre, ethereal, visual, virtual communication to which we are now sentenced. It has flattened us to 2 dimensions on screen, and that's if we're lucky enough to have the technology to begin with. A siren swells and then wails into the distance. After 9/11, I could walk the abandoned streets of disaster and notice the birds had been burning, sparrows caught in the upwind of the fire blast, their charred tiny bodies now clogging Wall Street gutters. When Hurricane Sandy flooded out all power in my neighborhood for days, I could walk 20 blocks to where electricity still was working, plug in my computer at a Starbucks, and crouch on the steps there, writing. This time I can't leave my home. I go out to the street in front of my building and stand there. The street is empty. Up and down the block, the cross streets seem empty, as if a pyroclastic cloud, like the one that hit Pompeii, had struck, sending everyone scurrying inside to hide and to be packed in ash. The streets have been emptied, but the obituary pages are still filling. They take more and more space now every day in the morning paper, a paper magically reported to, written by, edited, printed, published, and delivered by intrepid souls. Transformation seizes everyone, siren, whether we seek it or not. In Italy, soccer stadiums were turned into hospitals, ice rinks into morgues. Here in Manhattan, one of the largest conference venues in the world, the Javits Center, is now a hospital, as is the Arthur Ashe Tennis Stadium, home to the U.S. Open, as is Central Park's massive sheep meadow, site of so many concerts and festivals, so much joy and laughter, now a tent city filling with patients, because the worst is yet to come. The apex of the curve is expected within the next 2 weeks. Siren. Almost everyone knows someone, siren, who has tested positive. Normally unlikable New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose ego is the size of Montana, has humbled himself before Trump and other governors to get equipment needed to save New Yorkers' lives. It's still not enough, but he's emerging as a kind of anti-Trump national figure, as people across the country and even world recognize his shabby, rough-hewn magnificence. He suddenly grew into an efficient, compassionate, honest, effective leader. Given the lack of national leadership that is not malevolent, states have been competing in bids for ventilators, beds, and staff, but Cuomo is trying to initiate a networking structure among the governors that might address the rolling death wave as it sweeps across the nation, state by state. Some governors, of course, still follow Trump's nonchalance blindly to the death of their hapless citizens. Aeschylus wrote that one who learns must suffer, and even in our sleep, pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom. He added, through the awful grace of God. This wisdom today comes through the awful grace of nature, of which we are a part. Grief is how our species learns. We learn geography through war, names like Nagasaki, Mogadishu, Da Nang, Bosnia, Mosul. We learn economics the hard way, too. The current and coming economic crash has already yielded more unemployed than did the Great Depression, and the aftermath is so unpredictable that the questions alone are staggering. The Black Death in the 14th century of Europe ended feudalism. Will COVID-19 transform or end capitalism or socialism or even patriarchy? We learn science through emergencies, although scientists try to persuade culture after culture to support research before a crisis. We learn our interconnectedness through tragedy. The scientists lead the way, dropping professional competitiveness, sharing research, collaborating toward a vaccine across political and national boundaries. Aeschylus understood our species. We learn through grief, siren, but we do learn. Our learning curve, however, is too slow and shallow. 9/11 in many respects is still going on. A climate change-affected, gravely dangerous hurricane season is predicted this fall. COVID-19 will not be over in a few weeks or months, or to be honest, possibly years. Siren. Hope can only be reached through the valley of honesty. Our species needs to mature, to evolve. This is a new normal, replacing the old new normal that we were just beginning to get used to instead of triaging the idea of normal altogether. Our species has begun some things it cannot stop. A spring wound up so tightly must uncoil. It may not be up to us when this ends, but it is up to us how it ends. Every major catastrophe in history has offered the shattered society left behind a chance to literally resettle. Resettle everything, from family structures to economic systems, national borders, scientific discoveries, life expectancy, definitions of power, definitions of everything. This is our chance, granted us by the natural world, which apparently knows too well how our species learns, none of which comforts those who died alone, none of which comforts the mourners. Most people know Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's great novel, Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, only from bastardized versions and movies. Fewer know about another of her novels, The Last Man, an apocalyptic work. Set in the year 2100, The Last Man is about an airborne plague evoked by calamitous human behavior, a plague faced by one man alive on a planet that may be devoid of all other human life. Empty. Mary, whose mother had died in childbirth and who recently lost her husband to accidental drowning and 3 children to disease, had a dark vision, but an unquenchable spirit. Farewell, she wrote in The Last Man, to the giant powers of man. She was 28 years old. I go into my garden and sit quietly so as not to disturb the birds. They glance at me and glance away, a cool, indifferent gaze, as if they could be disturbed by anyone who had not descended from dinosaurs. Siren. Their indifference is comforting. There will be more letters from Ground Zero this time, I'm afraid. Forge courage. What can we learn from this? Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.